So let's see what is the DOM in JavaScript. DOM stands for Document Object Model, and we're gonna see a diagram that is going to show in a better way what is exactly the DOM. So normally your HTML file is going to be referred as the document. Once you are in the document, you will have two different main areas. One is going to be the head, and the other one is going to be the body. So let's start on the left. We have the head, and for example, something really common in the head is that we have a tag that is called title. So normally in the DOM, the tags like title, h1, navigation, and others are known as elements. Inside the title tag, you are going to have, for example, a text that says my new website or something like that. In the DOM, that's going to be referred as the text. So something important about the DOM is that the DOM is not only the tags that you have in your HTML. It's going to be all the different tags and classes and attributes. So let's continue working now on the right. For example, we have a body, and inside we have a navigation, and we have a heading one. Something really simple. You can see we have two new elements, navigation and a heading one or an h1. Let's start in the navigation. So for example, inside the navigation, you are going to have an anchor. So again, this is going to be a tag, so it's going to be an element. And inside this anchor, you are going to have a text for this anchor. So this is going to be referred as the text. In case that you add, for example, a class into your anchors, this is going to be an attribute. And this navigation, anchor, about us text, and this attribute class, all of these are known as nodes. And the DOM is how these nodes are connected. So you can see you have a class that is inside an anchor. This anchor is inside a navigation. This navigation is inside the body. And this body is inside the HTML, which is inside the document. So the DOM is going to be how these are connected one to the other. Let's continue in the heading one element. So the heading one element is going to have a text, maybe something like welcome. Then maybe you can add an ID or a class. These are going to be referred as attributes. Again, in the document object model, these rectangles that we have here are going to be referred as nodes. And the document object model is not only the tags that you have in your HTML, it's going to be these text, these attributes, and how they are connected between them. Something really important in the DOM scripting is that you can select one element, for example, this heading, and then refer to the text, write a small JavaScript function, and replace that text with a new one. This is known as DOM manipulation or DOM scripting. Also in JavaScript, for example, you can select this nav, and you can refer to the parent element, which is going to be the body, or you can refer to the sibling element or child elements. This is known as traversing. And in this chapter, you are going to learn everything about DOM scripting, traversing, and how to manipulate the DOM in JavaScript. So the DOM is this, all these nodes, how they are connected, all the tags, all the different texts and attributes, everything is going to be the DOM in JavaScript. So let's start working with the document object model. And we're gonna review in this video some of the methods when you're working with the document object model or the DOM. In your course materials, you will find this DOM card. We're gonna open this into Visual Studio Code, and we're going to run the server. So let's open the index.html, right click and open with live server. Close this. And open with live server. And this is going to be the project that we're gonna work in this chapter. It's going to be a really simple HTML, but this contains all the different elements that we can select using JavaScript. So we're gonna close this. And in the JavaScript folder, you will find this app.js, so open that file. And we're gonna start working with the DOM. So we're gonna create a variable, we're gonna call this one element. And we're gonna send that to the console so we can see the values that we're sending to the console. So the most important keyword is going to be one called document. We're going to add element equals to document. All your selectors in JavaScript will start with this document. Always is going to start like this. So if we create document and then we assign that value to the element, we're going to see this value into the console. Also, for example, if you type document here, it's going to return the same. It's exactly the same, but we are doing this in code. So let's expand this, and you can see that we have all the HTML. We also have the head with the style sheets, also the title. And if you open the body, you will find all the HTML that we have also in this index.html. All this code is the same. So this is going to be the global document. This document is going to be the parent of all the selectors. So for example, we can add something else right here. I'm going to add element equals to document dot all like this, and it's going to print all the different tags that we have in this HTML. You can see that we have the HTML, we have head, meta, title. We also have the links for the style sheets, and we have all the HTML. You can see that we have 207 different tags. So this .al is going to return all the different tags that you have in your HTML. And you can see that this is returning something called the HTML collection. It's really similar to an array, but it's not an array. But you can access the values, for example, the same using the index. So we're going to add all, and we're going to add the index, which is going to be 0. And you can see this is going to return the whole HTML. We're going to add, for example, something like 200. And you can see that this is printing an anchor with the text help, which is going to be here on the bottom. So something like this. So of course there are more efficient ways of selecting these links, but we're gonna see those in upcoming videos. We're gonna add another one. For example, element equals document.head is going to return only the head of the document, which is going to be this part. So open this, you can see we have the same. Also we have document body, so we can copy this and paste, and this is going to return all the content that is inside the body tag. So we're going to open body, and you can see we have everything right here. We have the header, we have the footer, and the links to the JavaScript files. We can also print element equals to document dot domain. Save this, and this is going to return the URL where your project is hosted. Then we're going to add, for example, the URL, which is going to print the same, but also is going to print the port. And you can see that we have in the top the file name. We also can copy this. Since all these are going to be the same, we can print something called the character set. Save this, and you can see that we have the UTF-8, which is going to be here on the top. It's going to be the char set of the document. So we can copy this and paste, and we're going to add, for example, the content type. Content type in uppercase, and it's going to be text, HTML, the whole document that we have here. For example, if you are using JSON, it's going to print JSON. If you are using XML, it's going to print XML and others. So for example, there are other selectors. We're going to see, for example, how to select all the links. We can add element equals to document dot links. This is going to return all the tags that include this anchor. You can see we have some of them here on the top. Here on the card you have these are links. We have also the buttons to add to the card. And here on the bottom we have a bunch of different links. So for example, let's select this one, the number 2. You can see this one has an ID, has some classes, so it's going to be a good example. So again, this is an HTML collection, but you can access this using the index similar to an array. So it's going to be number 2. Save this, and this is going to print this clear card, which is going to be right here. It's going to be this one. So you can see that this contains an ID and also a class. So you can access those values adding something like this. The document.links, then the index, then a dot, and an ID. And it's going to print this is the ID. And also you can add dot class name to print the different classes. There is another one called class list, and this is going to print the classes in something similar to an array. You can see we have 0 and we have 1, but this is something called the DOM token list, but it's really similar to an array. So let's continue. Let's, for example, see how you can select forms. We are going to add element equals to document dot forms and send this value to the console. You can see that we have only one form, which is this one. And for example, we can access some of these values. So in JavaScript, you will have access to all the different attributes. If we expand this or inspect this, you can see that this form has a search, a method, a class, an action. You can access those values in JavaScript. So let's return to the console. You can see that it's returning only one item, but it has the index of 0, so we need to copy that index. We need to access that index, which is going to be 0. Save this, and now you can see we have form action. We remove the HTML collection. So for example, let's say that you want to access that ID. It's going to be like this, the index 0. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to add .id, and it's going to print the ID. You can also print the method. Method is going to be post. If you change that to get, it's going to print get. And we also have the action. Save this, and you can see that the action is this pound sign, and this right here. If you open this, we make a search for action. You can see that we only have this pound sign. And what else? Let's add something like action. Then we have class list. Save this, and this is going to print the different classes. We only have this class called form, or you can also use that class name. Is going to print only the form. The class list is going to return this as DOM token list, which is really similar to an array. Class name is going to return this as a string. So in the class list, we can add class list in position 0, and this is going to print only the form. So you will have the same result as this example. So this is working nice. Let's say continue working. Let's review, for example, selector for all the images. Element equals document dot images. It's going to select all the different tags that or the elements that contains this IMG tag. So it's going to be like this. You can see that in this document we have 28 images in all the HTML. And what else? For example, the scripts. We can have something like elements equal to scripts like this, and you can see that we only have 3 scripts. One of these is Wapalizer, which is an extension that I have. This one is, you can see we have this data and WebSocket. This is by Light Server. And we only have this one, which is here on the top. If we scroll to the bottom and we find an attribute called outer HTML, you can see that we have the link to the app.js. So this is going to be index 0. You can access this, for example, copy this and paste. And we're going to add the scripts 0. Then we're going to add get attribute, and we're going to pass the src like this. Save this, and you can see that we have JS and the file that is called app.js. If you open the index.html, you will find this on the bottom, JS app.js. So let's open again the app.js, and we're going to copy these images, and we're going to make a simple example, looping all the images. We're going to send these images to the console, and again, we have this HTML collection. We can access these values individually by adding the index, because the HTML collection is very similar to an array, but it's not an array. So we can make, for example, let images array, images array, and we can add an array that from the element, we can rename this to something like let images and add images like this. So this is going to take the HTML collection and it's going to convert this into an array. So if we copy and paste this right here, now you can see that we have opened this. And here at the bottom you can see that we have an array. So we took that HTML collection and using this function we convert that collection into an array. I'm gonna remove this, and finally we can use the for each. For example, we can also use while or for any of the previous functions that we saw. I'm gonna use for each. Images array that for each. Then we run a function. We need to pass the name. It's going to be image. Of course, you can name this whatever you want. And I need to remove these parentheses. We only need one parenthesis there. The other one is going to be closing the statement that we have here. So we're gonna send this image to the console. So save this, and now you can see we have all the different images. If you wanna print this src, you can only add that src, and it's going to print all the sources of all the images. You can see they are right here. So of course I don't pretend that you memorize this. Programming is not about memorizing things. The idea here is that you always use document and you have these dots to access all the properties. Also you have these functions like get attribute, so we can access something like this. And we're gonna continue practicing in this course. In the next video, let's see other options that we have to select elements in JavaScript. So let's review some of the functions to select DOM elements. I'm gonna make this a little smaller, something like this. This is a responsive website. So let's review, for example, first the functions that will return only one match or one element that matches the selection that we're trying to make. So for example, I'm going to open the console, scroll, and you can see that these online courses, and I'm gonna make this a little bigger, is an H1. It has an ID of heading and also a class called heading, and contains the text online courses. So we're gonna open again the console, and we're gonna see, for example, selecting DOM elements. So we're gonna select that heading, and we're gonna use console.log in this case. We're gonna document dot get element by ID is going to be a function that is going to select an element based on this ID. So for example, if you open index.html and we search for online courses, you can see that we have this ID called heading. Also the class is called heading, but this get element by ID is going to select the ID. So we only pass parentheses, single quotes, and we pass heading. So save this, and you can see that we have in the console this H1 with the ID heading, and we'll return all the content from this element. So let's create a variable right here. I think this is going to be easier. We're gonna call this heading. It's going to be equals, and we're gonna copy this. Then we're gonna send this heading to the console, heading, like this. And this is going to print, and yeah, I was missing the semicolon here. This is going to print the heading. So again, remember, if you want to access this ID, you add .id. It's going to print heading. I'm gonna remove this A. And if you wanna print the class, you can use class name. Save is going to print also heading, or you can use class lead. This is going to return a DOM token list, and you can see we have heading right here. If we remove this, and you want to return this text that says online courses, you can use dot text content, and this is going to return just the text. So one of the main features of JavaScript is that you can change the CSS in your website. So I'm gonna remove this. We're gonna use this heading, and it's going to be like this. You will use heading, and if you wanna change something in the CSS, you have to use a dot, then style. So style is going to tell JavaScript that you want to use all the methods and functions to make changes in the style. It's going to be really similar to CSS in the syntax. So for example, if you want to change the background, it's going to be background, same as we have in CSS. This is going to be equals to single quotes, $, and we're going to add 333. Save this, and as you can see, we have applied a different color in the background for this heading. And using dot style, you will have access to the same properties that you have in CSS. So for example, we're going to add another one, heading dot style dot color, to change the color, and we're gonna change this to white. So it's going to be 6Fs. Now you can see we have online courses. If you want to add some padding, you can add something like this, heading dot style dot padding, and you can add the value 10 pixels like this, and it's going to increase the padding. You can change this to 20 pixels if you want, and you can see we have more padding. In CSS, also, if you have, for example, a margin top, it's going to have a dash in the middle. In the case of JavaScript, it's going to be a little different. If you add heading style, it's going to be like this, margin, and then top. T is going to be in uppercase, and it doesn't have the dash or any spaces. And you can add 50 pixels here, and it's going to increase the margin on the top. The same goes for background color. Background color is going to be like this in CSS, background dash color. In the case of JavaScript, it's going to be color in uppercase, like this, without any spaces. You can see the result is the same. So I'm going to remove this margin top. So for example, let's see how you can change the text. In that heading, it's going to be like this, heading dot text content equals to the best courses. Like this, gonna save this, and now you can see we have changed the text. Now it says the best courses. Also, there is another way of doing the same. It's going to be heading that inner text, new heading. Save this, and now you can see we have new heading. I recommend this one, but we can also use this one. Both ways are fine in using this. So normally this is going to be the workflow. You are going to use getElementById to select an ID, and then you're going to pass some of the properties. So let's make another example. There is another way to make a selector. It's going to be, I'm going to remove everything. Instead of using getElementById, we have other called querySelector. And querySelector can select an ID or can select a class. The syntax is really similar to CSS. So I'm gonna save this, and I'm gonna scroll to the top. Here on the learn something new, we have this, and you can see I'm gonna make this bigger. This has an ID called learn, and also is using an h2. So we're gonna use querySelector. We're gonna add const. It's going to be learning heading, and we're gonna document, and we're gonna use querySelector. QuerySelector is going to return only one value. The first value that it finds on the HTML is going to be returned. So we're going to call this one learn. The syntax in this one is similar to CSS. So if you want to use or select an ID, you have to use the pound sign. Then we use the ID. Send this to the console.log, learning heading, just to make sure that this is working. Open the console, and you can see we have the h2 with the ID learn, and also the text. So from here you can add, I'm gonna cut this page right here, text content, and we are going to add a new heading, something like this, and you can see we have a new heading. GetElementById will select elements based on the name of the ID. QuerySelector, if you use the pound sign, is going to select an ID, but also it can select a class. Select a class with querySelector. So in this one that says special offer, we can select this, and you can see it has this class called tagline. So we're going to add something like const tagline equals to document querySelector, and in this case we're going to use a dot, which is really similar in CSS. When you have a class, you have to use a dot, tagline like this. And then we send this to the console just to make sure that this is working. Console, and now you can see we have a paragraph, and it says tagline. And if we expand this, you will find a bunch of different information. Here on the bottom, you will find the text content that we saw in the previous example, text content. So for example, you can add something like this, tagline, and a dot, text content, and we're gonna append this to a new variable. We're gonna call this one const new text, and we're gonna have tagline dot text content, and we're gonna add that replace, and replace, remember the first item is going to be 15, and the second one is going to be the value that we're gonna replace. So we're gonna replace 15 with 12. Then we're gonna add tagline that text content is going to be equals to the new text. So save this, and now you can see we have a special offer, any course at 12, and it's going to be also here on the HTML. If we remove this again, remember this is going to print 15. So let's continue working, and you can see, for example, we already saw heading, which is going to return the element that matches this ID, heading. Then query selector, you can select based on the ID or also in the class, but always is going to return just one item. So for example, if we scroll right here, or better, if you open the index.html and we make a search for card, you can see that we have this class called card. Also here on the bottom we have another one and another one. If we make this bigger, each of these courses is in a div class or contains a div with the class card. So maybe you are asking what happens if we add document.querySelector and then we pass a class that exists more than once. So for example, if there are different elements, the query selector is going to return only one element. So we are going to add let card document query selector. There are 12 different elements with this class, but the query selector is going to return the first one only. So I'm going to make this bigger. Inspect this, open the console, and you can see that query selector is going to return only the first one. The other ones are going to be ignored because query selector is going to select only the first one. If you want to select different elements with the same class, in the next video we're going to see other functions. So also query selector can select based on, for example, a tag. For example, here on the top we have this tag called h2. So we can add something like selecting a tag. We're gonna add let heading equals to well, here we have heading already on the top. We're gonna comment that. Let heading is going to be equals to document query selector, and in this case we're gonna pass h2 like this, similar as we have in CSS. So you can see we have, I need to send this heading to the console, and you can see we have h2. So you can also select by ID, by class, or by tag name. Also something interesting in query selector is that you can nest your selectors with a CSS syntax, something like this. For example, let image equals to document query selector, and let's say that we want to select this image inside the card component. We can use, of course, one of these classes, but we can add card img, something really similar as we have in CSS. We're gonna send this value to the console. Open the console and you can see that we have select the first image. So in query selector, you're gonna have this ability to nest your selectors like this one. Finally, let's add something here. I'm going to add that query selector supports nth child, also first child or last child, that are selectors that you have also in CSS. So we're gonna scroll to the bottom, and this menu, this one is in a div called primary, so we're gonna select this, and we're gonna add let link, and I'm going to add link equals to document dot query selector, and we're gonna select that ID primary, and then we're gonna select an anchor. So if we send this value to the console, remember this is going to select only the first one because we have a bunch of links, but query selector is going to return only the first one. So if you want the first one, you can add also first child like this, similar to CSS. You can see we have the first child. Also, you can, let's copy this. We're gonna change this from first to last child. And this is going to select the last child of this menu. And also you can use nth child. We're going to add nth child, and we're going to add, for example, the number 2. And this is going to return the second link in this menu. So these are the basic functions to select only one element: get element by ID and query selector. In the next video, let's take a look at the functions that we have to return multiple elements. So let's continue working in the next video. So in the last video, we saw get element by ID and query selector. Both functions will return only one element. In this video, we're going to see how you can return multiple elements. So we're going to start with a function called get elements by class name. So this is going to return all the elements with the class that matches this selection. So for example, we're going to start here on the bottom. I'm going to scroll, and all these links that we have here, all these links have this class called link. So we're going to call this one const links. We're going to add equals to document and dot, and we're going to get elements by class name. You can see that in get element by ID, element was in singular, in this case is plural. So get elements by class name, and then inside parentheses, inside quotes, you add the name of the class that you want to select. Then we send this to the console.log links, and we open the console, and you can see that this is returning a collection with 8 different links that have this class. So you can see all the items in the menu at the bottom have the same class. So let's say that you want to select the first one. It's going to be something like this: links and the position 0. And this is going to return only the first item. So of course we can make also some scripting here. Links at the position 0, we're going to add style.color, and we can add something like color red. Save this, and you can see that the link now is red. So for example, we can add something like links, position 0 again, and we can change the text content equals to new text. And you can see that we have changed also the text. You can also change the background color and any property. Remember that you can change any property here. Style.background equals to black. Save this. You can see now this is in black color. So you can also use query selector and get elements by class name to select an element. So for example, I'm going to remove this. Let's say, for example, here on the bottom, if we inspect this, and I'm going to make some space, you can see that we have this navigation with ID primary, and we have also another navigation with ID secondary. Let's say that you want to select only the links that exist on the primary. So your selector is going to be like this. I'm going to remove everything from here. Right here, I'm going to add document.query selector. I'm going to make this bigger. And then I'm going to add another dot, but I'm going to remove this document because we already have document right here. So you can add query selector and get elements by class name. In this case, I want to select this primary. Let's add the quotes and then the pound sign, and let's send these values to the console. Let's send links to the console. So save this, open the console, and now you can see we only have the icons from the primary navigation. the links from the primary navigation. Also, you can use query selector. You can also use get element by ID. You remember only have to remove this pound sign, but the result is going to be the same. So you can mix the values. And remember, get element by ID is going to return the ID. In query selector, you decide with the pound sign or with the dot if you are selecting classes or IDs. And get elements by class name is going to return all the matched elements with this class. So let's remove everything from here. There is another one called get elements by tag name. So let's say that we want to select all the images from this document. You can see that we have this tag, and it's going to be like this: const images equals to document dot get elements by tag name, and we're gonna select the tag. IMG is the name of the tag. Then we're gonna send this value to the console and save this, and you can see we have in the console 28 images. So if we remember, this is similar to a function that we saw in the previous video called document.images. So this is going to be really similar. The result is going to be the same. So let's remove this. And let's say, for example, I'm going to save this and open this. Let's say that you want to return the logo. So it's on the 0 position. You can add something like 0 right here. And you can see we have the IMG src and the logo. If you want to print the source, you can add .src. It's going to print the src. Or if you want to print the ID, it's going to be .id. So you can access those values really easy. So let's open this again. I'm going to remove this and I'm going to leave the images. You can see that this is a collection. If you remember, we saw how you can convert this. So we're going to add convert HTML collection into an array. Something like this. We're going to add images array. It's going to be equals to array.from images. Then we're going to send this images array to the console, and it's going to be an array. So you can loop through this using, for example, images array that for each function, and then you pass the image right here, and console.log image, like that. And for each should be in uppercase, the letter E. So you can see we have all the images. Something that may cause confusion is if I remove everything from here, and also this one. If we add something like const heading and we add document get elements by tag name, and we add an h1 and we send this value to the console, heading, save this, and you can see that this is by name here. It should be get elements by tag name. Sorry, was my mistake. You can see that this is returning only one element. The get elements by tag name can be used to return one or more elements. In the other hand, the query selector, if it finds more than one element, is going to return only one. Maximum is going to be one. But get elements by tag name can return only one element if one element matches the selection. But if there is more than one element, it's going to return all the elements that it found. So get elements by tag name is going to return everything, and get elements by ID is going to return maximum of one element. So that's important and maybe a little confusing. So we're going to remove everything from here. If you remember, in the last video we added something like this: const cards equals to document query selector, and we added card. Then we send these cards to the console, and it's returning only the first element, which is going to be this course. If you want to return all the cards with all the divs or sections, all the elements that contains this card class, you have to use query selector all in this case. And now you can see that this is returning all the different cards that we have in our design. Also, you can use, for example, we're going to add something like courses, and you have card, you can add H4. Remember query selector, and query selector all share this functionality or these selectors similar to CSS. So you can see we have a not list, which is similar to an array. So for example, you can add courses and the position 0. In this case, it's going to return h4 with the text HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript for beginners. You can add a dot right here, text content, save this, and it's going to print this value. Let's remove this, and you can see that this is returning a not list. So we can convert that not list similar as we did with the images. So right here I'm going to add courses. Let's add something like courses array equals to array that from courses, and then we're going to add courses array that for each function course, and then we're gonna console log the course and also the text content like this. We're gonna remove this, save this, and now you can see we have all the course name that we have in these cards, card h4. Let's scroll to the bottom. Here we have these links. You can see this one has this ID for primary. So we're gonna make an example using those. We're gonna see, for example, how to select auth links, and we're going to add something like this: const auth links is going to be equals to document dot query selector all, because we want to retrieve all the links. Then I'm gonna filter this using primary, so it's going to select only the elements that exist in this primary. Is going to ignore these ones, the secondary links. They have the same class, but I'm going to add primary right here. And we can use this primary like this, similar to a CSS selector. Then the anchor, which is going to be the class, the tag, and we're going to add nth child, and we can use auth. So from here you can add something like this, auth links. You don't have to convert this into an array. You can add something like this directly. Function, and we're gonna give the name of auth, and then I'm going to add auth dot style dot background color, and we're going to add red, and then we're going to add auth style dot color, and we're going to add white. So save this, and now you can see that the 1, the 3, and the 5th element are going to be with this CSS, red and white. So for example, you can copy this. Let's create a comment that says select event links, and we're gonna change the variable even. And right here the selector is going to be nth child even, like this. Then we're gonna copy this collection. You can convert this into an array, but you can also do this directly like this function. And we're gonna add even, and we're gonna copy this and paste. I'm gonna select this auth, and I'm going to add even, but instead of printing this as a red background, we're gonna add blue. So save this, and now you can see we have one of these in red and the other ones in blue. So one last example, I'm gonna remove everything from here. Of course, I recommend that you keep these codes and save, and I'm gonna inspect this. You can see that this button, this anchor, has this class add to cart. So we're going to add something like this: const add cart btns is going to be all the buttons. We're gonna change all the add to cart button text in this example. This is going to be equals to document dot query selector all. So this is going to return all the different buttons, and we're gonna select using this class add to cart. So we use a dot add to cart. Then I'm gonna send this value to the console just to make sure that this is working and we don't have any errors. You can see we have this node list. We can convert this into an array, but we can also loop this directly. I'm gonna loop this directly like we did in the last example. Add cart btns dot for each function, and we're gonna pass a button. So the singular name is going to be button. All the node list is going to be this variable.
So finally, we're going to add button dot text content equals to something new, and save this. And now you can see, if I close this, you can see that all the buttons have changed the text to something new. So if you want to continue practicing this, I recommend that you change, for example, these prices, also this one, the name of the author. Continue practicing, and you will see that the power of this query selector and the different selectors that we have in JavaScript. Of course, all the projects are going to be using this syntax, so there is a lot of practice left, but this is the basics that you need to know. In the next video, we're going to take a look at traversing the DOM, and this is going to be a really important topic. So let's continue working in the next video. So in this video, we're going to see what is traversing the DOM and some of the functions that you will find in JavaScript. Traversing the DOM is how you move in your HTML code based on how the elements are related to the other. In traversing, you will define the element that you want to select first, and then you will move with these functions until you reach the desired elements. So let's start working, and I'm gonna open the project. I'm gonna open the console right here, and I'm gonna move the console to the right. And we're gonna make this a little bigger. So it's going to be more like this. We're gonna open the console. Yeah, something like this. This way we can see the code, for example, the HTML, and we can also see the console. And something like this will work. So we're gonna call this video traversing. And we're gonna create a variable called element. And first I'm gonna select a navigation. So we're gonna select one of the navigations that we have in this document. Here on the bottom, for example, right here on the footer. If we open the container, then the row, then this div, you will find that we have this nav with the ID primary. So we're gonna select this one. Document dot, and we're gonna use query selector, and we're gonna select the primary. So let's send this console to the console log navigation, save this, and you can see that we have the navigation here on the bottom. So let's say that you want to list these icons. There are two methods that you can use. So for example, if we add right here, I'm gonna use this element. Copy this and paste, and we're going to add element is going to be equals to navigation, and we're going to use the first element, the first function is going to be child nodes. So save this, should be like this, save this, and now you can see that we have a node list. You can see that we only have 5 different elements, 5 different links, but this is returning 11 elements. So why this is happening, maybe you are asking. If you open the index and you scroll to the bottom, each of these spaces that we have here are going to be treated as a text. You can see if I open this, or if I hover here, they are empty, nothing is highlighted on the left. If I hover here, you can see that the first element is highlighted. So you can remove this, for example, you can remove this and remove all the space that is available. And let's save this. And now you can see we have 8. So this is not a good idea because we want to keep this order in the HTML. So there is another function called that children. And that children is going to print only the elements. Now you can see, so this is returning only the 5 different links that we have in this navigation. So from here you can access one of these. So let's say that we want to select the first one. We're going to add the index 0. And this is going to select only the first element. You can also add something like a dot, and we can add something called the node name, like this. And you can see that it's printing an anchor. This is going to be the element. Node name is going to return the element that is, you can see this is an anchor. There is also something called the node type, like this, and you can see this is returning a number 1. So let me add right here, number 1 is going to be equal to an element. So this is an anchor, it's going to be an element, a valid HTML class. Then we have 2 attributes, 3 is going to be equals to text notes. Number 8 is going to be equals to comments. And number 9 is going to be document. And finally, the number 10 is going to be equal to doc type. And of course, you can make a search for these values, but the result is going to be the same. So for example, we have this not type. We can add something like this. We can copy this like this. We're going to remove this. So here we're selecting the first element. We can change this text, and you can see that we make a traversing because we selected the navigation, then we list the children, then we select the first element, and we're doing something like this. We're gonna copy this, paste, and I'm gonna add something like dot text content equal a new text, something like this. And now you can see here on the bottom we have new text. So we select the navigation, but then we list the children, we get the children that we need to, and then we change the text. So that's exactly what is traversing. So we're gonna remove this. And right here, if we send this element, navigation.children to the console, you can see that this is printing 5 different elements. So let's select for example, this one, number 4. We're gonna add 4. And we can also add another children. So 4 children. Now you can see it says HTML collection because it doesn't have anything else. So let's select another one. Let's select, for example, I'm gonna inspect right here. You can see that we have this ID that says courses list. So we're gonna use this. We're gonna add courses list. We're gonna change the ID. In this case, we're gonna change courses list. And we're gonna remove this. Save this and open the console. You can see that this is returning 5 different elements. So let's select the first one, number 1. We're gonna add number 1 and then dot children. So this way is going to return the children. Now we have each course like this. So let's select the number 0. Number 0 right here. And then dot children again. So now we have a card and you can see we only have 1. So we're going to add 0 again, dot children. Save this. And now you can see we have an image and also we have an info card. So you can list all the children that you want. If the element has children, it's going to list the children. Otherwise, it's going to return an empty HTML collection. So let's open the console and I'm going to inspect this. I want to open this info card, so we need to open the position 1. So we're going to add position 1 right here. And now you can see we have this info card. So let's review other methods that you can use. Children is one of those, but we're gonna see some others. There is one called last child. If we save this, you can see that this is returning a text. Remember, a text like this is going to be the white space in the HTML. So there is another one called last element child, and this is going to check actually for the HTML element. We're gonna, well, you can see that this is printing the anchor. If I remove this and we open this, you can see that the last item in the info card is this anchor. So this last element child is going to return the last child of this component. You can also, for example, copy this, and you will have also first child element. First element child, and this is going to return the name of the course. So that's going to be interesting. Also, if you want to check how many elements this component has, you can use child element count. You can see we have 5 different items. If we remove this, you can see that we have an H4, a paragraph, an image, another paragraph, and the anchor. So this is it for traversing from parent to children. You can see we have children. You can see that you can add children and then you pass the position. You also have last element child, first element child. You can also count the elements. So in the next video, let's see the opposite way. We're gonna see the traversing from the child to the parent and other functions. called siblings. So let's continue working in the next video. So let's traverse the DOM from the children to the parent. We're going to select one of these. This is going to be the first element that we're going to select. So for example, we're going to select this add to cart class. So we're going to call this one traversing from the children to parent. So we're going to add something like this, let cart btn. And this can be also a const because it's not going to be reassigned in the future. So we're going to use document query selector. Remember, query selector, even that this class exists in more than one element, is going to return only the first matched element. So it's going to be a class like this. And then we're going to send this value to the console just to make sure that everything is working. Open the console, and you can see that we have the anchor right here. So the way that you traverse from the children to the parent is using several functions. We're gonna create another one called element, and in this case element is going to be equal to cart btn. So we're gonna send this element to the console, and you can see that we have something like this. So this is working better. So we're gonna copy this, and there is a function called parent node. Well, we're gonna go from the parent to the parent node, and you can use something here, parent and node. So save this, and now you can see that we have the anchor, and we're traversing to the parent, and it's bringing all these elements right here. But I recommend that you use parent element. Dot parent element is going to return the same result, but it's going to be a best option. You can see it's returning the same. You can also add, for example, another parent element right here. You can add all the parent elements that you need until you reach the point that you are trying to get. So for example, now you can see we are in the card, and we have this IMG, and we have also this info card. So for example, from here you can add dot children, save this, and you can see this is returning a collection, and you have the image. So for example, you can add something like this, position 0 to access the image, and now we have the image. So you can traverse the document like this using these functions, going from parent to child, or going from children to parent, or mix the functions like parent element and then dot children. So there is another way of traversing, it's called the sibling. So we can add, for example, something like element equals cart btn, like this. And we're gonna start from the button, and we can use, for example, the sibling. It's going to be the same elements in the same level. For example, if you open, or if we add parent node, these are the siblings of the button. All these elements from the h4, paragraph, IMG, and this paragraph, they are siblings of this button. They are all childs of this info card, but they are siblings of the button. So we're gonna start working with this. We're gonna, for example, start, and if you want to access, for example, this price, you have to use something called the previous sibling. And we're gonna add something element equals to cart btn and a dot, and we're gonna use previous sibling. So save this, and you can see it's printing a text. It's printing a text because it has a white space. So the same as we saw in the previous examples, there is previous element sibling. So element is going to ignore the white space, and it's going to check only for valid HTML tags. And now you can see we have the price. If you wanna continue, I think we're gonna add something here, for example, element, and we're gonna send cart btn and parent element, like this. So this is going to print the parent element, and this is going to print the sibling. So you can see we started in the anchor, then we are here in the price. So if you add another previous sibling here, previous element sibling. Now we have the IMG, because if we take a look here, we started here, then we added a previous sibling, and you can continue adding more previous sibling until you reach the point that you are trying to achieve. Same as we have previous element sibling, we're gonna select, for example, the next previous element sibling. So we're going to add something like this. We're gonna add next element sibling. If we add element equals to car btn, and then we add next element sibling, it's going to print something like null, because if we expand this, there is no next element, and this is the last element already. But we can add something like this. We're gonna copy this, and we're gonna select the course name. We're gonna add const course name. It's going to be equals to car btn, then parent element. Then we're going to add a query selector, and we're gonna select the h4. So we're gonna send this value to the console. Just to make sure that everything is working, you can see we are here on the h4. So using this, now we can test the next element sibling. In this case, it's going to be course name, next element sibling. And here I'm going to put back the element. So save this. Now you can see we have Juan Pedro. If we expand this, you can see that we started here on the h4. Then the next element sibling is going to be the name of the author, which in this case is going to be this. So if you add another one, next element sibling is going to print the image. Again, if we open the parent, it's going to be started here, then the name of the author, then this image, and you continue adding more. Next element sibling is going to print the price. Next element sibling is going to print the button. And if you add another next element sibling, it's going to return null, because there are no more elements there. So you can add, for example, previous element sibling, and it's going to return, it's going back one sibling. But of course, something like this doesn't make any sense, right? So this is how you can traverse also going from the children to the parent, and also the siblings. We have a bunch of different examples. So in the next video, we're gonna see how you can create elements with JavaScript, how you can create new elements in your HTML before we start building the first project. So let's continue working in the next video. So let's see how you can create elements with JavaScript. These videos are going to be really important, because these videos are going to be the foundation of all the projects. In all the projects, we're going to create new elements, we're going to remove elements, we're going to replace elements, and basically that's one of the most important things in JavaScript. So let's start working with this. Let's create a new element. We're going to create something basic. We're going to create, for example, a new button right here, a new link in the primary navigation. So right after help, we're going to add a new one. So it's going to be the code like this. Create a new anchor. It's going to be like this, const. And we're going to name this with a new variable called new link. Then we're going to use document again. And the function is called create element. So then you create the tag that you want to use. Here you can see we have a list of all the tags that you can create. So basically any HTML tag can be created using this create element. So we're going to create a new anchor. It's going to be like this. So we can send this to the console, for example, new link, and we can see the result. So save it. Now you can see we only have the anchors, the anchor tag, the opening and closing tag. So next, if we inspect right here, you can see that each of these links is using the class called link. So we can add a class, and we're gonna add nav link, new link, sorry, which is the name of the variable. Then we're gonna use a dot, and we're gonna use class name equals to link, and save this. And now you can see we have our anchor, and now it has the class called link. So let's add the href. At the moment, this href only point to the pound sign. If we inspect right here, you can see we have the pound sign. But basically it's going to be the same for any cases. So we're going to add new link dot href equals to the pound sign and save this. And now you can see we have the new attribute called href. If you want to link to something, for example, google.com, you can add the full path like this. It's going to link to Google. Or if you want to link to index.html, it's going to be like this, and you can see we have href index.html. So there is an alternative way which I consider a little more outdated. You can add something like link, new link, and then you add set attribute, and you add href, then a comma, and then you add the link. And saving, you can see we have the same result. But I consider this a little more outdated. In my opinion, I like this syntax more. But of course, I try to show you the different alternatives that you will find in JavaScript. So you can see that this is looking nice. You have the anchor, we have the class, and we have the href. We're missing the title or the text in this link. So let's add a text, add the text. And it's going to be like this. We're going to add new link, and then we're going to add a dot, append child. So the text is going to be a child actually of the anchor. So we're going to use append child, and then we're going to append the parentheses, and inside we're going to add document dot create text node like this. And then you pass the text for this anchor, which is going to be something like new link, something like that, something simple. You can save, and you can see that we have the text inside the tags for this link. So finally, once you have your new element complete and you want to print this in the HTML, you have to add the element to the HTML. And normally, for example, I'm gonna select here, and let's say that we want to print this in the primary navigation. So this one with this ID primary. So we're gonna add the following. We're gonna use document dot query selector, and we're gonna select that primary. Then we're gonna add another dot. We're gonna use append child, and we're going to append this new link with all the new attributes. So we're gonna move this right here, and once I save, the new link is going to be printed right after help. Save, and now you can see that we have the new link. Create elements in JavaScript is really easy. You can see that the syntax for the classes, href, also we saw the attributes to create the text. These functions are really easy to use. But the most important thing here is that when you insert something into the HTML, you have to select the parent, and then you are going to use append child to insert that new element into your HTML. And you can see that this is working. Now we have a new link that we create with JavaScript. Of course, if you have, for example, a menu like this one on the bottom, you're going to continue building menus like this. Normally, you will create elements like this when you are using something, for example, an AJAX call, and you want to print the result, or something from a REST API, or something using JSON, or if you want, or if you are adding elements to a shopping cart and things like that. So in the next video, we're going to continue working. We're going to see how you can modify HTML elements, how you can replace an element with other. So in this video, let's see how you can replace elements in JavaScript. Replace an element like this. We're going to scroll to the top. And here we have this, for example, this heading. It says online courses. You can see that this is an H1. It has this ID heading and also the class heading. And the text says online courses. So we're going to create a new variable, const new heading is going to be equals to document create element. And let's replace this for an H2, a heading 2. And I'm gonna send this to the console so we can see how we are building this new heading. So you can see we have an H2 here on the bottom. So next I'm going to add, for example, add an ID, and we're going to add new heading dot ID. It's going to be equals to heading. So save this. Now you can see we have an H2, and it has also the ID of heading. So let's add the text. Add the new text. It's going to be new heading dot append child, and then we're going to use document dot create text node, and let's add something like the best courses. So save this, and you have to click here, and here on the bottom you will find the text content. You can see it says the best courses. So now this heading is ready. You need to add, for example, you need to select the old heading. So we're going to add const all heading. It's going to be equal to document query selector, and we're going to select the heading, the ID or the heading with this ID. Then you also need to go to the parent. In this case, this doesn't have any parent. Or let's see. Oh yeah, it has this parent that says courses list. You can see we have this ID, courses list. So we're going to add something like const courses list. It's going to be equals to document dot query selector and the ID courses list. So we have the new element, we have the old element, and we also have the parent. So then we're gonna replace. And we're gonna replace this, and we're gonna add the parent courses list. Then we're gonna use a dot replace child, and this function takes two parameters. First is the new element, and then the element that is going to be replaced is going to be our heading. So let's make this smaller and save this. And now you can see we have the best courses. So it looks a little different because first is an H2, and also we miss add the class and new heading dot class list, and we're gonna use class list dot add, and then we're gonna add the class called heading. And let's inspect this, see if everything is working. You can see that we have H2, then we have the ID heading and the class heading. It didn't make any difference, the class in this case, but this is how you add also a class. And now you can see this is the new element, and the other element, the one with the H1, has been replaced with this new element. So in the next video, let's see how you can remove an element from the DOM. It's going to be important. For example, we already have an example in this project. If we open the shopping cart, you can see that we have these items. So maybe you want to remove one of these. You add a course to the shopping cart, and then you decide that you want to remove this. So this is why it's important to remove elements from the DOM. So let's see how you can do that in the next video. So in this video, let's see how you can remove any element. So we're gonna inspect the code right here. We're gonna open the console, make this smaller, scroll to the bottom, and let's say that we want to select one of these menu items. So we're gonna call this one remove elements. So first we're gonna create a variable links equals to document dot query selector all. And if you remember these links that we have here, they have a class called link. So we're gonna add dot link like this, and we're gonna send this to the console links. So save this and open console. Now you can see we have all the different links. So you can remove an element, for example, by its own, or also you can remove an element by the children. So first, let's remove an element by itself. For example, let's remove the first one, this one that says for business. we're gonna add links, position 0, and then you are gonna add remove. Save this, and now you can see that the item with the for business link is gone. So using this, you can remove anything. So for example, let's select one of these cards. We're gonna change this to cards, and in this case is .card, the name of the class also. And we're gonna make this bigger so we can see better. So let's remove, for example, this one, the last one. The last one is going to be the index 11. So we're gonna add cards, index 11. Then we're gonna add remove. And you can see this is gone. So you can see how easy it is to remove elements with JavaScript. So this is how you remove elements by itself. You can see that we are selecting the variable and then we're executing the remove. There is another method. Is remove by the children. So let's say, for example, that we create a variable called navigation and we target the document query selector. We target the primary navigation. So then we send this value to the console just to make sure that everything is working, the selector is working. You can see we have this nav. If we expand this, you can see that we have 5 different menu items. So for example, you can see that we have 5 different items, and you can use, in this case, we're gonna add another variable, const. We're gonna add links equals to document query selector. And in this case, I'm going to add, for example, primary, and we're gonna add also the links, dot link, like this. Console.log links, and you can see that we have the query selector all right here. So you can see that we have all the items, and we also have the navigation right here. So you can use something like this. Navigation is going to be the parent dot remove child, and then you pass the child that you want to remove. This is going to be from the other variable, links. So let's say that we want to remove the last item, the link that says help. It's going to be links position 4, and save this. And now you can see the last menu item is gone. So you can see that this second method requires a little more code than the first one, but feel free to use whatever you want. So in the next video, we're gonna continue working. We're gonna see how you can create or modify classes, IDs, and attributes in your HTML with JavaScript. So let's start working with classes, IDs, and other attributes that you will find in HTML. So first we're gonna select one of these icons, one of these items in the menu, these links that we have here. You can see we have something like this. So we're gonna select the first one, this one that says for business. We're gonna call this one classes, IDs, and attributes. We're gonna select a link. It's going to use document query selector, and we're gonna use that class dot link. So query selector is going to return only the first element. Then we're gonna send to the console an element. So here on the top we need to create that variable, let element. An element is going to be equal to link. So this way we can preview the changes. So here you can see we have a link. So for example, if you want to read the class, it's going to be like this, element equals to link dot class name. So save this, and now you can see we have the class called the class name. Also, you can read the class, and this will return a DOM token list, which is similar to an array. We're going to add element equals to link. In this case, it's going to be class list. The other option that you have, you can see we have a DOM token list, and in the 0 position, we have this link. So for example, if you want to access a specific class with class list, It's going to be like this: element equals to link class list, and then the position 0 in this case because we only have one, but you can see it's going to print the class list, or the class in this case. So let's say that you want to add a new class. It's going to be element, it's going to be link, then a dot, and we're gonna add class list, add, and we're gonna add new class here. So save this, and now you can see here on the HTML we have this new class. If you want to remove the class, you can use link.classList.remove. Let's say that you want to remove that link class. It's going to be like this. So save this, and now you can see that we only have one class, the one that we added in the previous lines. So that's going to be also important. So for example, let's review how you can work with IDs. So we can add something like link.id equals to new ID, and now you can see we have an ID right here. And this is going to apply to any element. We only have this link, but this same technique is going to apply to any HTML5 element or any HTML element. You can add, for example, remove the ID. Of course, an element will contain only one ID. So you are going to add link ID equals to nothing and save, and now you can see that the ID is empty. You can also add remove the ID by adding link, and we can use something called remove attribute, and we pass the ID. This is going to remove everything. So now that we have this attribute, let's use the attribute functions. There are several functions, attribute functions. And for example, I'm gonna continue sending values to the console. We're gonna add element equals to link, a dot, and we're gonna use get attribute. And we're gonna pass the attribute that we want to retrieve, which in this case is going to be the href. So save this, and you can see we have the pound sign. You can also use this syntax to return the class. In this case, class like this is going to return the class, but I recommend that you use class name or class list. The same way as we have get, we have also set functions. So for example, if you want to change the href, you can use element equals link set attribute, and then you need to pass only the attribute href and then the value http://facebook.com. In this case, for example, save this, and now you can see we have href and it says Facebook. If you want to add a new attribute that doesn't exist, you can add something like element equals link set attribute, and you can add, for example, the target. We can add underscore blank. Save this, and now you can see we have target underscore blank. In HTML5, for example, you can create custom attributes. So you can add something like link set attribute and add something like data link, and then pass, for example, number 10. And this is going to create a custom attribute, data link, and the value 10. If you want to check if an element has an attribute, you can use link has attribute, and you pass the name of the attribute, data link in this case. So save this, and you can see we have true. If you want to remove an attribute, you can use the same as we saw in the previous example, remove attribute. So element equals link remove attribute, and we pass the attribute data link, and you can see that this removes the attribute. So basically in JavaScript you have full control of all the nodes and everything into your DOM. You can change everything, you can update something, you can add new values, update the values, or remove any attribute using all these functions that we saw in this video. So in the next video, let's see what are event listeners and how you can create your first event listener in JavaScript.